Welcome everyone to today's webinar, Uncovering the Value of Your Database. My name is Stacy Hunt and I'm the Marketing Communications Manager at DMTI Spatial. And with me today is Adam Peterson, Senior Product Manager. Just a few things before we begin. All participants will be placed on mute. Should you have a question, please submit using the webinar console. We will address questions at the end of the webinar. Tomorrow I'll be sending out an email to everyone that's participating today that will contain a link to the recorded version of today's webinar, along with a link of our last webinar that was called Detox Your Database, and Adam will discuss that later. I'm now going to turn things over to Adam, so please go ahead.
Thanks a lot, Stacy. And once again, I too would like to thank you very much for attending today's webinar. So the purpose of this webinar, Uncovering the Value of Your Database. What I'm going to take you through in the next half hour is give you an overview of how you can get value from your database through a series of customer case studies. And we're going to start with this point here. So 85% of all of your data has ties to location. This can include your existing customers, assets, maybe it's prospects, and it can all be tied to an address or a set of geographic coordinates. This can become invaluable across multiple use cases. So the higher precision, the better you are able to geocode each one of these, the more insights you're able to derive. Creating a view of the world that you can get insight from is the core of location economics. DMTI makes it easier to uncover these insights and allows you to be agile and able to adapt, especially since your customers and your data is constantly changing and evolving. So what are the steps that we're going to go through in order to show you how to uncover this value within your database? We'll uncover each one of these in a little more detail as we go and throughout the case studies, but here's a high-level overview. So the first step is to detox your existing data. This was covered in a previous webinar a few weeks ago, and as Stacy mentioned, we're going to follow up and send you the link in case you didn't get a chance to see it. But what this webinar really entailed was how to cleanse, correct, standardize the existing data in your database and assign persistent identifiers to each record, and the importance of doing so before beginning any additional analysis. Through cleansing each address, each record that you've got, you're able to assign that high precision address, that geographic lat-long coordinate, and you're able to then place these onto a map. This is great to review where they are in relation to one another, or maybe your assets. Then taking these addresses, enriching them with additional content such as demographics, business information, and then going from that macro level, so your entire database of customers, and going right to that granular level in order to review your addresses by maybe postal code, neighborhood, however you want to review them at that smaller, refined view. Then you can apply additional analysis such as proximity, drive time, drive distance in order to see where your addresses are in relation to your assets or each other. Find new customers, infill customers that share existing characteristics with those that you already have in your database. And finally, you tie all of this together and you really begin to get that uniform view of your customer, what they like, what they dislike, where they are, and how far they're willing to travel to your location. This is an example of two ways that we're all fairly familiar with working with data. On the right, you've got a static table. This could be a spreadsheet, a database, some way that you're interacting on a row-by-row basis, trying to get insights at a record-by-record level. The second one to your left, that's a visualization. So what that is a mapping of every single address placed at that high-precision geographic coordinate. So that database, it's static. It's a static data. So it's a great tool to review your customers, trying to get more insight information out of that single record. But when you try to see information across all of your users and really try to begin to see and infer relationships between each one of those, it becomes a little bit more difficult to do so. And this is where visualization becomes a very, very powerful tool. When you want to look at your penetration in a region or an area, or how your customers are accumulating along specific assets or corridors, visualization is that key. And when you've got that high precision latitude, longitude coordinate, you can place them in proximity to one another as well as your location or assets.
That's great, Adam. And I'm just going to take a minute to throw a polling question out to the audience. If you want to take a second to tell us, what tools do you utilize to work with your data currently? Is it within a database, Microsoft Excel, through a GIS tool, or is there another way that you do this? And I'll share the information with everybody once everyone's voted. Just about finished. That's great, thanks. So I'm just going to share that with everybody. Looks like the majority is within a database, and the rest is using GIS tools.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's great.
Thanks, Stacy.
No problem.
So what information do you need in order to get more information out of your customers, out of each record that you've got in your database? Well, the first one is, who are your customers? This is by cleansing, standardizing that correct location, getting to know where they are, and then you can use the information that you've also collected and stored within your own database to then begin to create that picture of who your customer actually is. You can append on additional characteristics onto that address to allow you to better target, find new customers that share similar characteristics. You begin to influence that previous point of who they are, so you begin to see more information about them. Where are they located? So you now know where they are geographically. You can look at how close they are to your assets, what is their proximity. You can identify how far they might be willing to travel in order to reach your location. And in knowing this information, you can really begin to identify where there are opportunities and if you're in a position to quickly take advantage of them. The last one, where are new customers located? So you've already identified how far they're willing to travel, where they are located in relation to you. Where are there new customers within that share these same characteristics, and how can you take advantage and market to them as well? So I quickly want to recap. I know I've touched on the fact that we'll send out the webinar link, but just to really recap and start that base of what that address data might already be present there, and why it's important to start with that cleansed, geocoded, corrected address. So there's three types of bad address data, and the first is incomplete. So this is an incomplete address. It doesn't have all the information that's needed to properly locate that customer, to properly identify them, to put them in the right location. It might just be missing a street type, but it could also be missing a postal code, the street name, the city. So when information isn't there, you can do your best to fill it in, but sometimes it might just get thrown away and not even stored in your database. The second one is an incorrect record. So this can sometimes be even more damaging than just an incomplete record, because when it's incorrect, you've actually got the wrong information there. So you might have the wrong postal code, the wrong city, the wrong street type. This could place it in the wrong location. You could infer the wrong relationship, and then you've got the wrong distribution. Duplicate address information. Unfortunately, even with a meticulous data entry process, duplicate records do occur. There's one example here where we've provided 8 databases from a single customer, and we saw the same address 24 different times, spelled 24 different ways, 24 different iterations of the same location. So in order to combat this, we've got that persistent identifier, which regardless of how many iterations of an address you have, that key is always the same. So you can really remove duplication from the database and begin to work with that single address record. As I mentioned, we're going to cover off a few case studies. The first case study is going to be with Union Gas. Now, this is a major Canadian natural gas storage, transmission, and distribution company with over 100 years of experience and service to customers. In approaching DMTI, Union Gas was looking for us to assist them to identify neighborhoods which match specific criteria and were eligible for their incentive programs in order to help their customers and addresses save on energy costs and reduce their total energy consumption. In identifying the neighborhoods which were eligible for this promotion, Union Gas was able to determine where they should focus their efforts and reduce unnecessary costs to their marketing efforts, and they were able to actually pinpoint each location on a map in relation to one another. So they were really able to refine and target the right people and ensure that they weren't wasting their own resources in identifying these. So what were the steps that we proceeded with in order to get this output with Union Gas? Well, the first one, cleanse, detox their existing database. Standardize, geocode, get that persistent ID on every single address. Visualize the addresses on a map with that high accuracy, high precision geographic coordinates. Append in additional content that they didn't have in their own database onto every single existing address. This allowed them to now look for the similarities, trends that each customer that they were looking for shared. They were able to take that, and now they could find new customers, new addresses, which shared these same characteristics, were in proximity to these addresses, and then target these ones as well. So here's an example of an existing customer base placed on a map at that high precision, so they can really begin seeing where they have penetration, where they're lacking some penetration, where some customers are located, and where they want to then target. However, you can really begin to segment this down by appending on additional information to each record, such as the dwelling type, household age, gas consumption, single household, household income, and property size. So in appending each one of these variables to every single address, they were beginning to create that view of their customer, identify who their target customers were, and using that geographical coordinates, they were able to accurately target them. In doing so, they were able to take a distribution that looked something like this into a much smaller subset of that and identify those addresses which shared the exact characteristics that they were looking for. So they could target them properly. They weren't wasting their resources in targeting everybody along the map. So taking that subset that you saw there on that high zoomed out map of the area, you can now zoom right into that neighborhood level. And here you can look at each region. These are the customers they had in a neighborhood. They're represented by the red dots, and you can see that they're right at the rooftop of each building. These are the customers that share these characteristics that they're looking for. So in order for them to begin identifying new customers, what they want to do is identify those customers that share these same characteristics. So they're in the same neighborhood. They're likely to have the same age of home, square footage, likely have the similar gas consumption, and I can begin to identify and build out a database of customers that are within proximity to one another, within proximity to their asset, and they match that exact criteria they're looking for. So they are able to leverage this information. They could begin cross-selling and find new opportunities. They could optimize their sales territories because they now could ensure that they had appropriate coverage. They could identify new trade areas, and they could look at the proximity to these customers to their existing pipelines. As every new customer that they're able to sign up and register, it reduces their overall costs. So it results in a cost savings to them by knowing where all of these customers are and targeting them appropriately. So what were their overall results of implementing this solution? Well, they saw a 400% increase in their uptake rate after implementing the solution. They saw 31% gas savings in one year, meters cubed. And the equivalent number of cars that were removed from the road is equal to 3,800.
That's great. I'm going to take a second just to throw another poll out to the audience. Are you currently leveraging location information in your marketing efforts? So if everyone can take a quick second to answer that for us, it'd be great. Just a couple more people. Excellent, thanks. And I'll just share that with everybody. We've got it pretty across the board right now. You're some, a third of us are not sure, and then it's kind of in between yes and no.
Thanks again, Stacy.
No problem.
So the next case study that we're going to look at is how a leading telecommunications provider utilized DMTI to create a more targeted campaign. So in approaching DMTI, the vendor was looking to improve the effectiveness of their demand generation activities, specifically those related to sales and marketing. It required identifying the correct buildings in order for the sales team to be able to go there, talk to them about the right product to meet that business's needs. So after taking their data, cleansing it, appending that high precision address coordinate, each record was also appended with additional variables and information such as business name, number of employees, number of locations of that business within Canada, industry type, this would be an SIC, an NAICS code, accurate address information, and that asset location. So that standardized address, be able to map it to high precision, as well as that additional content that can be appended onto every single record. In doing so, what were the results of this solution? So the user saw an increase in the number of buildings that they were able to identify, which directly correlated to a 45 to 50% increase in the number of businesses that they were able to target. They better prepared their sales team. They were able to increase their win rates to 40%. They were able to extend location-based information across their organization, and they were able to make better decisions on the placement of fiber corridors, increase their network optimization, result in faster install times, reduce their costs, and ultimately increase their customer satisfaction. They're also able to leverage and create internal visualization tools. Moving on to the final case study, we'll be looking at WireIE. This is an industry leader that delivers high availability, secure data over networks in rural and remote regions. DMTI in this case was approached to assist with the identification of businesses in remote or rural areas of Canada that are near an existing asset, which would allow their team to create targeted campaigns to market to the customers in these areas. So knowing where the customers are located, and we were able to accurately identify where they were in relation to each asset, would allow this customer to begin building out a campaign as to who would benefit from their services. Once again, every single asset was geocoded to high precision, so we could begin with that central point of interest. And then all addresses within the region of this address were appended with additional information. This included business name, the number of employees at the business, the type of the business, high precision addresses, standardized addresses, as well as the yearly revenue and the proximity to their asset. This information, once appended, was able to be integrated into a visualization tool. So using this tool, they took the centroid, which is the asset location, and were able to perform a radial search of a specified distance and attempt to identify all businesses that met that criteria within the proximity of the asset. So they were able to refine their results based on the size of the organization, type of business, how far customers are willing to travel to that business, the costs associated with providing information to that service, if there's any barriers that might prevent service from being there, even if it's within that proximity, such as a road, a stream, or a river. Review any outliers that might fall within or just outside the barrier. So if there's somebody that's at X kilometers plus 1, that would automatically be thrown out in just a data tool, but by throwing it onto a map and able to visualize it, you can really begin to make those ad hoc business decisions. And they were also able to review all potential customers within proximity to one another, so they could identify how much it would cost to service each one of these customers. So the immediate results allowed their users to properly identify business and provide the carriers with the names and contact information for specific verticals that are within proximity to the asset. So they're able to provide business name, SIC codes, as well as the industry type, so they could appropriate it to the appropriate salesperson. They're also able to provide information that they can use to obtain new customers for newly installed infrastructure. So they were able to market to them properly, they were able to speak to them, and they were able to identify exactly who was within proximity to their address. So after covering a few case studies, I'm going to go a little bit further into some of the specific services that are used throughout each one of those case studies and for each customer that we work with. First is drive distance and drive time. So this is what is showing you the boundary or the distance that customers might be willing to travel to the asset. It's very useful in locating a retail outlet, optimizing your service territories, returning all addresses that are within the boundary so you know how far people are willing to travel, or you want to find out how far people are willing to travel. You can then place a boundary over top of it and then return all the addresses within it. And you're able to identify serviceability areas. That was what the previous case study showed. They knew the area that they could service within a reasonable price point, and then they could further work to market to those customers. The second one is using that unique persistent identifier for every single address. This reduces the possibility of duplication or incorrect and incomplete data, especially if you're sharing data across multiple databases, because you're going to assign that same key to that same address, so that customer will always have the same key regardless of how many iterations you have in your database. It speeds up serviceability, it can reduce costs, increases your ROI, and you can really begin to identify cross-sell, upsell opportunities. So I'm going to show you how it can be useful in a real-world example. Taking a look at these databases here, if we were then to geocode these customers, plot them on a map, you can begin to link them together and identify how many products or services your customers have, speak to them correctly, and place them right at the rooftop of their address. So you can now begin to identify those cross-selling opportunities, those upselling opportunities, and market appropriately right to that household level. So just to quickly recap what we've covered so far, being able to target the right customer, you want to ensure that you can geocode their address through high precision and enrich it with additional content. It allows you to find new prospects by infilling more addresses that you might not otherwise have had, but share those exact same characteristics of the customers that you want to target. You can identify cross-sell and upsell opportunities, and ultimately this works for a better customer experience. You can make the process internal to you quicker, and then this ultimately benefits the customer.
That's great. I'm just going to give out one more polling question to the audience. Did you find this webinar informative? We always want to make sure that we're giving the information that you need in webinars. So if you can take a second to answer, that'd be great. Again, just to remind everybody that if you do have a question, please feel free to enter it into the question section on the console of this webinar. We have a couple that we're going to answer in a minute, but I just want to remind everyone. Okay, that's great. We will share the results of that as well. As you can see, generally speaking, 83% of everyone found this informative. That's good to know.
Excellent. So Stacey,
there's two questions, Adam. The first one is from Fred, and Fred's asking, what is the timeline on the case studies that you've mentioned?
That's a good question. Actually, the time's unique to the customer. Obviously, it depends on how much work we have to do in terms of geocoding, pending it, and their timeline as well. So it really varies by customer on a case-by-case basis.
Excellent. I do have one more question from Susan. Were those snapshots of your actual product when you were talking about proximity? Was that the actual product that we have?
No, actually, that was our online publicly available demo. So everybody is more than welcome to go to our website, go to the demo, and work with proximity, your own address, see the value of cleansing, geocode your address. Just go to dmtispatial.com. The demo should be
there is a link to our demo on it.
Absolutely.
If you go to the panel on our homepage called Experience Location, it'll take you right to the demo. Again, thank you everyone for attending, and I wish everyone happy holidays.